My brother called me a failure at my own wedding. "You'll never be a real man!" he shouted. I just smiled and pointed to my wife's hand. The whole room went silent when they saw. You know that quiet moment right before the bride walks in? That hushed, reverent stillness where everyone's seated, the string quartet is doing its thing, and the air feels almost holy? Yeah. That's when my brother barged in, drunk, red-eyed, and seething. He wasn't invited. I mean, technically, the invitation was sent. I did the polite thing. My mother begged me to. "He's your brother, Jacob," she said, like that single fact outweighed the 29 years of torment he piled on me. I sent the invite, assuming he'd blow it off. He hadn't even RSVP'd. Then again, Luke never needed permission to crash my life. Why would my wedding be any different? It started when I saw the groomsman by the door go pale and step aside. That's when I knew. Trouble had arrived. And still, I didn't flinch. I'd prepared for this. For once in my life, I was ready for Luke. He stumbled down the aisle, tie undone, eyes glazed with bourbon and bitterness. A few guests laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe it was part of a speech. It wasn't. He pointed right at me, loud, hoarse, angry. "You'll never be a real man, Jacob!" Gasps rolled through the room like thunder. Some people actually stood up. My mother covered her mouth. My uncle tried to intervene, but I held up a hand. Because this was my moment. I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye, smiled, slow, cold, and then gently reached for my wife's hand. And pointed. That's when everything went silent. Because on her finger was something no one, especially Luke, expected to see. Their late father's signet ring. The one Luke always assumed he'd inherit. It started with a dusty velvet box tucked away in a forgotten drawer. I was cleaning out the attic of my childhood home, weeks before the wedding, helping Mom pack up old things before she moved to a condo. The house smelled like mothballs and fading memories. I wasn't expecting to find anything of value. Just trinkets and relics from a life lived in someone else's shadow. Then I opened the drawer in Dad's old desk. The one we were never allowed to touch. Inside, wrapped in brittle tissue paper, was the ring. A heavy gold signet with the family crest engraved, 2 hounds flanking a tree, the motto beneath it in Latin, Virtute et silentio. By virtue and in silence. My father wore it every day until the cancer stripped everything from him. When he passed, the ring vanished. Everyone assumed my mother had tucked it away to avoid the inevitable fight between her sons. And now here it was. I held it for a long time. The metal still carried the weight of my father's hand. Of his silence. He wasn't a kind man, but he wasn't cruel. Just quiet. I spent most of my childhood wondering if I disappointed him, until I realized he just didn't know how to love someone like me. Not the way he loved Luke. Luke, the golden boy. Quarterback. Class president. The kind of guy who could walk into any room and command it. The kind of guy who dated cheerleaders, punched holes in drywall, and never once paid the consequences. He assumed the ring would be his. He said it once during Dad's eulogy, believe it or not. Standing up there, giving a half-slurred tribute, he ended it with, "And someday I'll wear your ring proud, old man." My mother had flinched when he said it. Now I understood why. She had hidden it. Not for me. Not for him. Maybe not even for any one reason at all. Just a quiet rebellion in the face of a loud, fractured family. I slipped it on my finger that night. It didn't fit. But it fit hers. That was the moment I knew. Not just that I wanted her to wear it, but that I needed her to wear it. Not out of spite, but out of reclamation. This wasn't just about a ring. It was about history, pain, and finally dignity. I was 19 when it happened. Sophomore year. I'd met Caroline in my freshman English Lit class, a quiet girl with a stubborn streak and a laugh that took me by surprise every time. We weren't fireworks. We were a slow burn. The kind that makes you believe maybe this time, maybe this one is different. I brought her home over winter break. Introduced her to my parents. And, reluctantly, to Luke. He was visiting from out of state. Still riding high on the tail end of his college football fame. Bigger than life, all wide smiles and lazy charisma. My mother lit up the second he walked in. My father actually laughed for once. Even Caroline looked startled when he entered the room, like someone had opened a door and let the sun in. I should have known. But I didn't, not until weeks later. I was back on campus when she stopped returning my texts. Stopped answering my calls. I gave her space. Thought maybe I'd done something wrong. It wasn't until one of her friends slipped, accidentally I think, that I found out. Luke had stayed an extra 2 weeks after break. He and Caroline had been talking. And then, they weren't just talking. I remember sitting on the floor of my dorm room, the phone cold against my ear as I listened to her fumble for words. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen. That he saw her. That it was different with him. She didn't even try to deny it. I told my parents. My mom bit her lip and whispered, "Don't make this into a bigger deal than it is." My dad didn't look up from the game. "Luke?" He sent me a text that read, "Should have known she'd go for a real man." That was it. That was the moment something inside me calcified. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, quiet. Like my father. Silent. But not broken. I buried myself in school, in work, in everything that didn't remind me of what I'd lost. I stopped going home for holidays. Stopped calling. Years passed, and Luke went from local legend to a name that only came up in family updates I barely listened to. I thought I was past it. Over him. Until the night I found that ring. Until I saw his name on the RSVP list and felt my stomach tighten. Until I realized that I'd spent my whole life trying to earn respect from a man who never deserved mine to begin with. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Everyone always talks about the bride's nerves, but I think grooms just hide it better. I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft rhythm of my fiancée's breathing, the occasional creak of the old farmhouse where we were staying. My mind, though, was loud. Louder than it had been in years. The ring sat in a box on the nightstand. It gleamed faintly in the moonlight, like it was watching me. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands, feeling the engraved edges, the weight of it. I thought about my father. He never said much to me. Not about the things that mattered. When I made the honor roll? A nod. When I quit baseball and joined debate? He didn't even ask why. When Luke threw a punch at me in high school and split my lip because I looked at his girlfriend wrong, Dad told me to toughen up. But on the day of his funeral, Mom took me aside. Her face was pale, exhausted from holding up under everyone's condolences. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "He wrote this the week before he passed," she whispered. "He wanted you to have it." I never told anyone what was in that note. Not even my fiancé. It was short. Barely 4 lines. But it said more than he ever did in life. "Jacob, you were always stronger than you looked. Not loud. Not angry. Just steady. That's real strength. I see it now. I'm sorry I didn't before." I'd read it so many times, the creases felt like scars. That night, lying in bed, I made a vow. That I wouldn't let Luke define me anymore. That I wouldn't let the past write my future. That tomorrow, when I stood at the altar, I wouldn't just be marrying the love of my life. I'd be reclaiming the parts of myself that had always been good enough. No more apologizing for being quiet. No more hiding. I slipped the ring onto her finger while she slept. Just to see. It fit perfectly. The morning of the wedding felt like the calm before a storm I didn't know I'd already predicted. The weather was perfect, blue skies, soft breeze, that kind of golden sun you can't pay for. Guests arrived in soft murmurs, dressed in linen and smiles, and the air buzzed with champagne and quiet excitement. My mother looked tired but relieved. She hadn't seen Luke in over a year, and she wasn't expecting him now. Neither was I, officially. But I had a suit tailored just in case he did show. Not for him. For me. Because I knew I'd have to stand taller than I ever had before. Everything went right. The processional music played. My best man, my college roommate Danny, gave my shoulder a quick squeeze before stepping out. I waited behind the door, heart beating in rhythm with the quartet outside. And then, just as I was about to walk toward the altar, there was a murmur. A stutter in the music. And I heard him. Move! It wasn't a shout. But it carried. Heavy, sharp, unmistakable. The chapel doors, wide open to the garden ceremony, framed him like a painting I never wanted on my wall. Look! Tall, sunburned, tie hanging loose around his neck. He was drunk, I could smell it even before he was within reach. His eyes were bloodshot and brimming with something feral. Not sadness. Not even anger. Envy. Pure animal envy. People whispered. Someone gasped. My mother stood up. My uncle tried to intercept him. But Luke just pushed forward, eyes locked on me like this was our final round. I didn't move. I held my ground at the altar, hands clasped calmly, chin lifted. Luke scoffed. Look at you, he slurred. All dressed up. Little Jakey, playing house. And then, louder. You'll never be a real man. It hit the crowd like a slap. Some people actually stood up. A bridesmaid covered her mouth. My fiancé froze mid-step, just at the end of the aisle. I felt Danny tense beside me. I saw my mother's eyes flash wide with shame. But I smiled. Cool. Deliberate. I reached out my hand to my bride. She walked forward, calm as stone, and took it. And I turned her wrist gently so that every person watching could see the glint on her finger. The signet ring. My father's ring. Luke went quiet. Dead quiet. Because he recognized it instantly. He blinked like he'd just seen a ghost. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not because of the ring itself, but what it meant. That I had inherited something he thought was his by right. And that Mom had chosen to give it to me. I let the silence stretch. Let him stew in it. The crowd was still. You could hear the breeze rustling through the garden hedges. Even the violinist had lowered her bow. All eyes were on Luke, and on the ring that now circled my wife's slender finger like a final word. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. Where did you get that? He muttered. I didn't answer right away. I turned to the guests, took a breath, and stepped forward. That ring, I said, voice steady, belonged to our father. Most of you know that. Some of you might have even assumed Luke would wear it today. Or inherit it. He did too. Luke shifted his weight, uncertain now, like the floor had started to tilt under him. But what you don't know, I continued, is that a week before our father passed he left a note. Not to Luke. To me. 4 lines. No grand wisdom. Just acknowledgement. An apology. He said I was stronger than I looked. That he saw it too late. People were quiet. No one moved. I turned to Luke. You bullied me. For years. You mocked me for being quiet. Called me soft. Weak. You embarrassed me in front of my friends, humiliated me in front of girls. You even. I swallowed, just once. You even stole the woman I loved. Just to prove you could. His face went pale. But you see, I'm not here to fight you. I'm not like you. I never was. And that used to feel like a flaw. Now I know better. I looked down at my wife's hand, still wrapped in mine. I wear this ring not because I'm trying to be like Dad, or like you. I wear it because I earned it. Because I never stopped showing up. For myself. For the people who mattered. Luke tried to laugh. It came out choked. So what? This is your little power play. Huh? Trying to what? Embarrass me? No, I said, voice cold. I'm just done hiding. I turned back to the guests. And if anyone here is still wondering what it means to be a real man, it's not volume. It's not fists. It's not walking into a room and demanding attention. I looked him in the eye one last time. It's knowing who you are, and being that person anyway. Even when no one claps. No one clapped now. But they didn't have to. The silence said enough. Luke took a shaky step back. For the first time in our lives, he looked small. Not physically, He still had that broad-shouldered frame, the kind of presence that always used to dominate a room, but now, it was like the gravity around him had broken. People weren't orbiting him anymore. They were watching him, measuring him. He looked around, searching for some kind of support, some smirk or nod from the crowd to prop him back up. There was nothing. Not from our mother, who sat stiff and silent, her eyes shining with something she hadn't let herself feel in years, guilt maybe, or recognition. Not from my uncles, who always treated him like the golden child at family reunions, slapping him on the back and calling him champ. And not from his old college buddies, who stood off to the side now, arms crossed, their faces neutral. He tried again, voice breaking. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. I think this makes me free. He looked down at the grass, jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. And then, without warning, he laughed. A quick, ugly sound. You think this little speech makes you a hero? He sneered. You've always needed to be the victim. Always needed someone to blame. But the words didn't land. He knew it. Everyone did. I just looked at him, calm still. I don't need you to be the villain anymore, Luke, I said. I just need you to be gone. That was when the officiant stepped forward. Gently. Almost apologetically. I think it's time we continued, he said, with that awkward half-smile people use to sweep shattered glass under a rug. Luke stood frozen for a moment longer, breathing hard, eyes darting between faces. Looking for someone, anyone, to give him a reason to stay. No one did. Eventually, he turned and walked away. Not storming out. Not with some dramatic flair. Just walking. Shoulders a little hunched. Hands twitching at his sides like he wanted to punch something but couldn't find a target. As he disappeared down the aisle he never should have entered, the hush lingered. And then, slowly, the music resumed. A hesitant chord. Then another. The ceremony picked up again. But nothing, not the vows, not the kiss, not the applause at the end, was louder than the sound of that silence. The moment the storm passed and left something brighter behind. The ceremony continued, but it felt different. Like the air had cleared, but everything was sharper now. More real. The flowers still bloomed, the sun still warmed the backs of our necks, but all the fluff had been stripped away. No pretense. No performance. Just truth. My bride, Emily, stepped forward, her hand still in mine. She hadn't flinched once. Not when Luke walked in, not when I spoke, not when the air went heavy with old wounds. She just stood there, eyes steady, like she'd always seen exactly who I was beneath the years of doubt. The officiant asked if we wanted to read our vows. She nodded. We wrote our own. There was a hush, the kind that leans in close. And Emily turned toward me, her voice clear but soft. Jacob, she said, people always ask me why I chose you. And I never quite know how to explain it in one sentence. But I'll try now. I chose you because of how you sit with pain. Because when the world tells you to shout, you listen. When others run from silence, you lean into it. You never ask to be praised. You just show up. Every day. When we met, I didn't fall for the loudest man in the room. I fell for the one who listened when I didn't know how to speak. I fell for the one who made space for me without ever asking me to shrink. You are quiet, but not small. Soft, but not weak. And today, I marry you, not to fix anything, not to escape anything, but to build a life where both of us can finally breathe. Her hand trembled slightly in mine, but she smiled through it, and that smile grounded me more than anything else in this world. Now it was my turn. I had rehearsed the words a dozen times. Scratched out lines, rewritten sentences, tried to find the right balance between love and truth. But in that moment, I didn't need notes. Emily, I began. I spent a long time thinking I had to be someone else to be worthy of love. That strength meant being louder, harder, more like someone I was never meant to be. But then you came along. And you didn't ask me to change. You didn't try to pull me out of my shell, you just sat with me in it. And slowly you turned it into a home. I don't promise you perfection. I promise you presence. I promise I'll keep showing up. Even when things get hard. Especially when things get hard. You don't just love the man I became, you helped me become him. And I will spend every day of this life trying to give you the peace you gave me. Her eyes welled up. And as the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and the guests rose to their feet, the applause wasn't just for a ceremony, it was for a moment. For truth. For all of it. But there was one more moment still to come. After the kiss, after the recessional, as we walked back down the aisle hand in hand, I spotted him. Look! He hadn't left after all. He was standing in the back now, away from the chairs, half in the shadow of a tree. Alone. Disheveled. And looking right at me. For a second, I saw something on his face I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not jealousy. Regret. Real regret. He didn't wave. Didn't shout. He just watched. And I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded once, not in forgiveness but in farewell. And then I walked forward. Into a life that had no more room for ghosts. The reception was held in a sun-drenched barn tucked behind the vineyard, strung with lights and laughter, the kind of place where the world feels like it might actually be kind for a while. People kept coming up to me, patting my back, shaking my hand, whispering things like, "That was brave," or, "You said what needed to be said." My mother cried at least twice. My uncle pulled me aside and said he'd never been prouder of me. Emily's parents, who had only ever known the quiet, polite version of me, looked at me differently, like they finally saw something deeper under the surface. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I felt light. Like I had been carrying something heavy for so long, I forgot what it meant to stand up straight. Emily caught me staring out across the field at one point, lost in thought. She came up behind me, slid her hand into mine, and leaned against my shoulder. "He's gone," she said quietly. I nodded. I know. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. Like turning the last page of a book you never really liked, but had to finish. I used to dream about moments like that, I admitted. Where I'd finally get the last word. Say everything I ever wanted to say to him. Put him in his place. And now that you have? I looked at her. It didn't matter as much as I thought it would. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop losing myself trying to keep up with him. We stood there a while, watching the last rays of sun stretch across the vineyard. Guests laughed and danced behind us. Somewhere, someone popped a bottle of champagne. The world spun on. I thought about how many years I wasted chasing his approval. And how in the end, the thing that finally shut him up wasn't rage. Wasn't violence. Wasn't some brilliant insult. It was peace. It was the quiet refusal to keep playing his game. He could yell all he wanted, but I wasn't listening anymore. That was what broke him. Emily tugged gently on my arm. "Come dance with me, Mr. Chambers." I smiled. "You sure you want to risk those toes?" She grinned. "Worth it." And so we danced. Not perfectly. Not gracefully. But together. And that was more than enough. Later that night, long after the music faded and the guests had gone, I found the ring on the nightstand again. I turned it once between my fingers, then set it back down next to hers. Not mine. Ours. For years, I thought strength meant winning. Outshining. Outlasting. Outyelling. Turns out, it just means knowing who you are, and staying that way. Even when no one's watching. Especially then. And if I could go back and speak to the boy I used to be, the one who stood silent while his brother laughed, I'd tell him this. You were always enough. You just needed time to realize it.